Hey, what's going on, guys? Ryan again with RPK Customs. We're going to be taking a look at my new Spinning Emitter V2 run today. This video might be on the long side because there's a lot I want to cover. So I'm going to start by going over the run itself, and then I'll get into all the accuracy stuff. So I machined most of these parts using my manual lathe. I studied the reference photos extensively while I was making them so I could get every little detail I could on this run, and I think they turned out pretty well. They are definitely the most accurate V2 I've machined to date. Now, there's actually going to be two somewhat different runs that I'm going to be doing. Um, I'm only making 6 of these specific hilts. However, I ended up meeting a CNC machinist that's only about 5 minutes away from my house. So I gave him one of these to reverse engineer for me, and I'm just waiting to get a prototype back from them. The CNC run is going to be slightly different than the manual run. Most of the changes just being on the inside. These are bored out to 28 millimeters, the same as my old run. So you might be able to fit a motor in one of these if you want to go that route. I'm not really sure how big the motors are since I've never built a motorized stunt. But the new CNC run is going to be static only. So no motor, no installs, just a spinning emitter static prop. Now, if you guys remember back in 2017, my very first V2 run, that was originally going to be a static run. But I ended up getting flooded with messages asking if I would make them installable. So we kind of changed some things around last minute to hollow them out. But I've always wanted to go back to my original static replica plan. I just don't think the V2 or really any original trilogy saber makes a good base for an install. They're just kind of detail oriented, which makes them a little awkward to swing around. Luke's Hero is probably the only OT saber that I would personally have installed. That's just my personal opinion. I just prefer to have my original trilogy sabers static. So this initial run is going to come painted, weathered, and fully assembled, ready to display right out of the box. They are going to come with Wonawanga hardware. That is the cone knob, boot stud, D-ring. This particular saber has a Wonawanga lever, but if you guys saw my last post on social media, you probably saw that I am currently making a new batch of levers to go along with the rest of this run. Now, since we're talking about hardware, I'm going to be doing something a little bit different with the CNC run. Those sabers are going to come more in a kit form, and they are not going to come with a cone knob, boot stud, or D-ring. Instead, I'm going to be making them fully compatible with Wonawanga's hardware. I'm doing this for two main reasons. One is I believe Roy from Wonawanga supplies the most accurate V2 hardware on the market, so there's really no real reason for me to make my own versions of these parts, especially if they're already available. And number two is by making these compatible with Roy's hardware, it's also supporting other people in the community, which is important, especially these days. All right, so now I guess we'll get into the accuracy stuff. The first thing I want to bring up is a new detail that I've added. And I've not seen this detail on any other V2 replica. I could be wrong. I have not seen a Dave P V2 in person, so this detail could be on his replica. I'm not 100% sure. But I've added this little radius right here. I don't know how well you guys can see that. Right at the base of the thin neck. And it doesn't seem like a huge detail, but in person, it just gives it one more layer of accuracy and really makes the saber feel that much more authentic. So now let's talk about why I added this little detail. If we look at the reference photos, especially the main photo that we see here, and I apologize if you can't see this all that well. I'm not great with technology. I don't know how to throw pictures up in video, so you're just going to have to bear with me. If we zoom in on the main photo here, right on the left side here, we can see what looks like a little radius in there. Let's see if I can get something to point with. Okay. So right in there, you can see it looks like there is a tiny little radius. You can't really see it on this side. Now, you could say that is just a trick of the lighting or something making it look a little bit rounded in there. There's no real way to tell. But if we look at this reference photo, we can see that that little radius is right there. Now, if we see this on both sides, so this would be the back of the saber, more towards the back because the clamp is kind of facing towards Mark Hamill's thumb. And in the first picture, we are seeing the clamp in front. So since we're seeing this on both sides, it leads me to believe that, yes, there is a radius right in there. So what is this radius from? I know there are some theories going around that the V2 was cast. From both the reference photos and my personal machinist perspective, I don't see any evidence that that's the case. Unless there's something that just hasn't been made public yet, it doesn't make much sense of why they would cast this. If this was Alec Guinness's stunt prop in A New Hope, and they only made one of them, it would make more sense to kind of just machine it. Remember, the first movie was under a lot of pressure to get things made quickly. And there's a lot more steps to casting something than if you were to just machine it from a chunk of aluminum. Casting would make a little bit more sense if you're making more than one, which is probably why they ended up casting a few of these in Return of the Jedi, or during filming of Return of the Jedi. But you can tell from the reference photos of the Return of the Jedi props, like the V3, that those were definitely cast. There's evidence all over them. I mean, they're riddled with casting lines and imperfections everywhere. How I do think the V2 was made was probably on a replicating machine. We had one of these machines where I went to school, but nobody ever used it because they're kind of useless in today's age of CNC machining. I think they used one of those machines to make a rough replica of Alec Guinness's belt hanger prop, which is called the MK1. And then they cleaned it up on a traditional lathe. This would make a little bit more sense to me because it would be a lot faster to do it this way than it would be to go through all the steps to cast it. In order to cast it, you would need to make a mold. You would have to have a foundry or at least some kind of forge to melt the metal. And then you would have to put it on a lathe to clean it up anyway. I could be wrong. There's just too many steps and too much time involved that makes sense to me. And again, I'm just looking at this purely from a machinist perspective and the reference photos that are available. So I have part of a Roman Props MK1 here. And if we look at the base of the neck, we see that there is a little radius down in there. And that same radius appears on the V2 prop. Now, this would have been picked up in both the replicating machine as well as a cast if they took the time to do the cast right, which, judging from the V3, it does not look like that was the case. That thing is just a mess. It's riddled with cast lines and everything. You can tell they really rushed the V3, which was most likely made during the filming of Return of the Jedi, not A New Hope, which A New Hope was extremely rushed during filming. So I would expect the V2 to have more imperfections if it was actually cast than what the V3 does. And I'm sure this little detail has been discussed on the RPF. I'm probably not the only person that's noticed this. I just have not seen this added to any other V2 replicas. Another detail I've added is the little machining mistake in between the pommel cubes. And I added this detail to my older generation V2s as well. And if we look at the reference photos, right there, hopefully you can see that, it appears to be raised. It's definitely not an indentation or a milled out hole. And this typically is what machinists will refer to as a rub mark. And anyone who has worked with a mill or a lathe knows what I'm talking about. This happens when you make a decent sized cut and then you stop on one spot for a prolonged period of time. Just a few seconds is really all it takes. So whoever machined this most likely took a good sized cut in between the pommel cubes at a pretty quick pace because, again, timing was an issue during the filming of A New Hope. Then they came back to finish the cut, but stopped halfway through for whatever reason, got distracted, needed a drink, whatever the case may be. And that was enough time for the chips to build up on the surface of this part. And instead of finishing the final pass, he stopped the machine, called it good, resulting in what we see here. This really only happens with softer metals like aluminum and brass, not so much with steel, but I can almost guarantee that that's what this is just by looking at the photo. And for those of you who don't know, an end mill is the cutting tool used in the mill. It looks kind of like a drill bit without the pointed tip, and they are slightly concave, not dead flat. And this is to add a little bit of relief to help with chip extraction. If they were dead flat, it would probably cause binding issues between the end mill and the part you're cutting. So because of that concave, it lends itself to make the chips build up on a flat surface. All right, so everything else on this is pretty straightforward. We have the radiuses in between the rings of the grenade section, and each ring is a slightly different width. And I've also added the little imperfection we see here at the base of the booster section. And I've added all the damage to the underside of the pommel and the pommel cubes. I also added my real rust compound to the clamp and the clamp lever in the accurate places. And I think that's about it for accuracy details. So now I will break this thing down so you guys can see how it all goes together and what makes the emitter spin. I'll show you that the emitter does spin. So this V2 is pretty much all one piece from the middle of the upper portion of the thin neck here all the way down to the bottom of the booster section. And the pommel is held on by this set screw right here. I'll try to get all this on camera. So there's your pommel. And I've added a groove right there. The set screw rides right in that groove, so you never have to worry about this coming out, slipping out of your hilt. Now you can see it's bored out pretty good. Like I said, I believe this is 28 millimeters. The emitter is held on basically just by this emitter nipple here. You can take the set screw out of the emitter nipple and the whole emitter will come off, or you can loosen up the set screws in or under the emitter dish, and the emitter nipple and everything will come out. So first I'll loosen this one up, and you can see the rod right there. This is the washer that the emitter rides on. I'll set that down. And we'll take a look at the emitter. So if you loosen the set screw under the emitter dish, your emitter nipple will slide out. And you can see the rod. I left a little bit extra length here just in case somebody does want to put a motor in one of these. You can custom cut that to any length you need. So now I'll try to put all this back together on camera. It's surprisingly difficult to do anything on camera, so just bear with me. All right, and it's as simple as that. Now, these are going to be listed on my new website, rpkcustoms.com. I have this one ready to ship. I have 2 more that have been painted and they're on my drying rack right now. So those are going to be available here in the next couple of days. As soon as I get the other one back from the machinist, I will start working on that and I'll get the next 2 finished up and listed as well. So I think that's going to be it for this video. If you guys have made it this far, I want to thank you for watching. I've been obsessed with the V2 for a really long time, and I'm extremely grateful that I get to make my own version of the prop and share it with everybody. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.